In case you've been living under a rock a million miles away on the surface of another planet in a parallel dimension where Waterstones and Amazon don't exist, then Mockingjay Part 2 marks the final installment in the global hit young adult franchise The Hunger Games. It is adapted from the book of the same name, one that clearly did not need to be broken into two parts, and follows the story of Katniss Everdeen, a young girl living in a dystopian future where the poor, unwashed, all played by sodding supermodels in perfect makeup by the way, are ruled by a tyrannical elite. After she is drafted into a deadly game of death designed to entertain the rich folk in the bustling capital of the inner cities, she quickly finds herself accidentally becoming a symbol of revolution, inciting a widespread attack aiming to remove the evil President Snow who keeps these oppressive forces in motion. And boy, whew, can I tell you, this finale to this whole saga is pretty rubbish, actually. Now, before the rabid fanbase these books and films have tried to volunteer me as tribute, I feel I should mention that I actually like the Hunger Games movies. Despite the fact that these films are targeted at a young female demographic and I'm a straight 23-year-old male, I have no problem saying that so far I've been totally on board with the PG-13 violent adventures of Katniss Everdeen and her journey to revolution. I'll even go so far as to say that I really legit love the movie Catching Fire, which stands head and shoulders above all the others in the series, so I was pretty hyped to see how this silver screen adaptation would come to an end. Mockingjay Part 1 was a little lackluster in places with a whole lot of nothing going on at times, but I rationalised this as being down to the unnecessary two-part split. After all, if we were to compare it to the Crown Prince and Holy Grail of young adult fiction, Harry Potter, then we would remember that Deathly Hallows Part 1 was more often than not a sea of dragged out pointless bullshit, and that all the really good stuff went down in Part 2. On that note, I was certain this was going to be the climax I'd been waiting for, and yet I left the cinema not with exclaims of, "Ah, that was mint," but rather, "Oh, okay." Now, I'll keep this mostly spoiler free since I know these movies have a huge following, and I don't want to ruin it for anyone who's super into the series, since you're likely to still have a really great time with the flick regardless, and despite my quarrels, I certainly wouldn't want to wreck that for you. Because, at the end of the day, this probably isn't a film for me to begin with, so much as it is a film for the fans. And they're gonna love it. However, that said, boy does this film have some flaws. Its biggest problem is that it's weirdly boring. I say weirdly because it has the setup of being the most exciting entry into the franchise. This is where it all comes to a head, where the revolution that's been slowly brewing for the past 3 films reaches its boiling point and erupts into a violent war for social change. And while it kind of is exactly that, it manages to be delivered in such a way that the whole film feels like an anticlimax. If this whole series was a firework, then the first 3 movies would be the escalating golden trail of a skyward rocket, and this final one would be the unremarkable wet fart that piddles out at the end instead of the explosion we were all expecting. I think the reason for this is that it's a far better book than it is a movie, and I'm not saying that out of some elitist love for the paperback version of this tale, but more out of the fact that there are entire scenes here that just don't work visually. Very early on in the movie, the rebels make their advance on the capital. Katniss decides to join them, but they deem her to be too special a symbol to lose, so her entire squad stays back, well behind the action of the fight, and makes propaganda videos in the now barren and empty streets. That's it, miles behind the actual conflict. Plot-wise, this is totally fine. It's a logical thing for these characters to do and it fits in with the narrative they've established. In a book, this perhaps reads really well, as you're able to get insight into the character's mindset. Interesting developments like how Katniss and the squad might feel guilty about letting others charge to their deaths, but visually speaking, it separates you from the actual big adventure going on in the background. It would be fine for the film if this was either A, a huge character-driven drama, or B, only a small part of the narrative and they get sucked into the danger and conflict early on. But it fails on both these regards because while it tries to be a character drama, the film is just far too talky. And this is 90% of the whole product. I don't mind dialogue-heavy scripts. In fact, I enjoy them, with Quentin Tarantino being one of my favourite directors, but I don't feel like I learned a single thing about any of these people. "Oh, look, Peter, one of the love interests is proper mental now," the movie tells me. And I'm like, yeah, I know, I kinda got that from the last film. "Whoa, look at that Gale, he's sure badass and handsome." Classmate, just like in the past 3 then. "What about that Katniss though? Want to hear her talk about how much she loves her family?" Not really. You kind of gave me everything I need to know when she volunteered for a death game in her sister's place. I feel like I kind of get what motivates this character now. It's not that there isn't action set pieces and a significant threat in this movie. It's just that each one is separated by what feels like an eternity of the characters sitting around chilling and chatting about shit you already know. It kind of undermines the legitimacy of this whole evil, oppressive force that could capture and or kill them at any moment, when they all have enough free time sitting around that they could binge watch the entire series of Jessica Jones on Netflix. Even when the danger is present, it doesn't always feel that significant. At another early point in the movie, Katniss's squad of soldiers accidentally activate a trap, which floods the place they are in with this weird CG oil stuff. Once the oil retreats, they shoot down a glass door and hide in a house, watching from the window as the soldiers searching for them scour the area. Eventually, the soldiers blow up a building they think Katniss is in, and then just sod off. And I couldn't help but raise an eyebrow. How did the dialogue between them go down there exactly to lead them to just so blatantly miss Katniss's nearby hiding spot? Was one of them all like, "Alright lads, we blew up that building over there and that had some people in, so I think it's a safe bet we killed her"? How was there not another soldier arguing? Did the conversation that followed not just go, "Yeah, Sarge, hang about lad, do you not think it's a distinct possibility she could be in one of these other buildings hanging about"? "Lieutenant, what you on about? Calm your shit down, we've obviously got her." But Sarge, like, there's loads of buildings. You not just want to at least see if we can ID the bodies in the one we just blew up first, just in case. "No, Lieutenant, we definitely got her." "Aye, but Sarge, there's a door, like, right there, like, just right behind you, that is clearly being shot in, like someone has forcibly went through there. Do you not want to at least check just this one building?" "I said we got her, Lieutenant." "Alright, fucking fine, didn't be a dick, man." I just wasn't buying it. Speaking of not buying it, President Snow as a villain is just too damn evil. And this is a problem I have with the whole series. He's like mustache twirlingly levels of sinister. The dude is practically parody at this point. I kept waiting for the scene where he tied Katniss to the rail tracks and did some cheeky mugging to the camera. I get that he's kind of a rich elitist snob with a disregard for the lives of the poor, and that's fine. But in this film, he literally says the words, "Ooh, we both know I'm not above killing children," and smirks with the kind of punchable face usually reserved for reality TV stars. I genuinely laughed out loud at the guy. He's like a panto villain who is about as subtle as a brick in the face. I mean, sure, he's meant to be a dick, but no one hates poor people that much, do they? Okay, disregard. Anyway, another big issue I have with this movie is that despite having all the time in the world to cover things, considering it only has to do half a book in its runtime due to the two-parter split, it still feels rushed. When the movie takes its time and works hard at a scene, it can deliver something truly memorable. There's a sequence where the characters are in the sewer that I don't want to spoil, but I will say is brilliant in its deliberate pacing and gives off a healthy dose of nail-biting tension. But these moments are so very few, and everything else feels bizarrely hurried. Character deaths in particular are really badly handled. I won't say who dies, but as you can assume, this is technically a war film, so you know going in there'll be a few who kick the bucket. So what I will say is the deaths are so rushed. Major characters are quickly killed in sharp 3-second flashes and then barely mentioned again. Compare this to the first film when the young girl Rue died. That had some emotional pull. We got time to stay with it and sit in the moment, to lament on what had happened. The characters around these events too would linger their thoughts on the tragedy, and her death was still a plot point brought to the emotional forefront even when we were into the second movie. Yet here, major characters are treated the same way as cannon fodder, and the film lacks a significant emotional crux as a result. Although saying that, kind of the whole movie is unusually delivered really. The ending, while solid plot-wise, feels like it just fizzles out, and never is there a moment that really struck me as big and important. If you don't know what I mean, think back to Catching Fire. When Katniss destroys the arena, it feels huge. There's a sense of scale that sells this decisive action as being an imperative moment in the narrative. The musical swell, the slow dawning reactions, the shots of the storm breaking away into the sky, it all comes together to sell the idea that this moment is massive. Or even think of Mockingjay Part 1, a movie often criticised for having nothing of note happen. Think of the moment where the rebel bombers blow up the dam. That slow build as the song picks up momentum, the choice of lighting, the shots of the crowd, the kick-in of the choir as the rebels charge, it's spine-tingling stuff. Mockingjay Part 2 has nothing like this. Yeah, it doesn't do anything badly, it's just that what it does do is fairly boring. And it's a shame because in the sea of quick cash grab young adult franchises that came after Harry Potter, this is the only one I felt actually had a real good thing going for it and stood out as being something worthwhile. But in the end, while this whole movie should have been the most important entry in the whole saga, it feels like the least important. And for that, it's completely unremarkable. Oh, and side note, that goddamn love triangle plot straight up doesn't work for me. Not because I think love triangles are a tired old cliche that need to stop, but because when the choices are between these two, there is a painfully obvious correct decision. Not knocking Josh Hutcherson or anything, but come on. I'm straight and I can clearly see that Liam Hemsworth is absolutely the one like. He has the genes of Thor and abs you could grate cheese on. Sort yourself out, man, Katniss.